Imagine you just get married and you have to go underground because somebody is trying to murder the democracy. And after that, you take on this crusade against the most powerful industrialist of the country, and you write articles after articles on the corruption in corporate sector and industries. Here I am today with a gentleman who needs no introduction, who is a political, socio-political analyst, economic politics analyst, a great chartered accountant, and besides that, when Mr. Cho Ramaswamy died, he left his baby Thuglaq in his hands. Mr. S Gurumurthy. Sir, namaskar. So what a pleasure talking to you today. Do you know that besides Shah Rukh Khan, like Shah Rukh Khan, you also have so many fanboys, people who vouch for whatever you say. To them it's like Bible or Gita, whatever you want to call it. Do you know that?
I know there are people who follow quite a bit of what I write and speak, but to say that I have the scale which you mentioned, Shah Rukh Khan, is a very different scale in a different field with a different appeal.
But your quality is very different. I'll tell you why. Because in today's time, there are very few people who fight. There are very few people who stand up to the truth, write articles against the establishment, go on, and they are willing to sacrifice everything. I talk to a lot of young people. I am always in the universities. And all these young people know about you. And they say there are very few people like you who will fight for this. What made you fight and sacrifice so much, especially when you should have gone for honeymoon? Why did you go underground and fought to defend the democracy?
You see, it's simply the love of this country. Its core, there is something spiritually linking me to this country. So I cannot withstand this country being torn culturally or politically or in any manner. So that is what actually invited me to participate in struggles after struggles. And it didn't matter what consequences it had on me or on my personal life or on my family life. I had a big joint family to support me. We were not rich, but emotionally I received such support from my 3 brothers. We all lived together. So 25 people in one house, you can understand how much of a strength it is. And so I had all the human resources needed for putting me in the battlefield. And that is why I entered the battlefield and I went underground.
Okay, and Indian Express played a very important, like Mr. Goenka played a, so was he like your mentor or what was your relationship with him?
In fact, I came in contact with him only during the emergency.
Okay.
And at that time, nobody would take up the work, even professional work of Indian Express, because whosoever was advising or working for Indian Express was also being targeted.
By Mrs. Gandhi.
Yeah, emergency.
Yeah.
I mean, all kinds of investigations, probes, inquiries. And Mr. Goenka invited me to become his advisor at that time in legal matters, because I was supposed to be very sharp in law.
Okay, so from legal matters to journalism.
Yes. So I handled all the difficult issues of Indian Express during the emergency, from pre-censorship, and in Delhi they took over the press, closed it down, sold the machinery in which the newspaper was being printed. They cut off the electricity. All these battles I got involved in. So I was put on the battle mode by the Indian Express also as to how to fight a battle legally, constitutionally, when the constitution itself was not there.
Yeah, there was no
but still we fought and won. And when Indian Express came out victorious in 1977, then Goenka and me became virtually twins. I mean, he was 72, I was 27. You can understand, in spite of the age gap. Of course, B.G. Verghese mentioned me as the friend, philosopher and guide of Ramnath Goenka. It is true that we were soulmates. We must have been soulmates in the previous birth. Otherwise, this kind of relationship could not have clicked. That is how I emerged as his political advisor. then by accident I had to become a journalist because nobody was willing to write about the boring subject of shares, debentures,
Yeah.
tariffs and all that. That is how I took up the investigation of
So,
Reliance.
what made you take on Ambani's?
You see, actually there is a history to it. The Indian Express itself was found to have been invaded by Ambani's corruption. Ramnath Goenka could not tolerate it. His own editorial staff had been corrupted to write articles and editorials in favor of Indian Express. Ramnath Goenka would never allow his paper to be corrupted by anyone. And when he found that the Ambanis had done that, he told me, Guru, this is not something which I can tolerate. And you have to help me. And I said, what I can do? I can investigate, produce volumes of information which can be used for publication. But I never thought that having done the investigation, in about 7-8 months I gathered about 3 volumes of materials to write on. But there was no one to write. Because everybody said that this is not a subject which will be interesting. This is not a subject in which I am an expert.
Yeah.
This is not a subject in which I have investigated. I am only using somebody else's investigation. And Ramnath Goenka said, Guru, there is nobody else other than you and you have to become a journalist. That is how I became a journalist.
Okay.
It was not by choice, it was by a force of circumstances. But really, it is the attempt to murder my friend Jamnadas Murjani. He is one of the finest persons. He was the trustee of Chennai Mission, a man who taught me the basics of this polyester economics and how Reliance had been manipulating the government, the rules and regulations, threatening the officials. He was the person who introduced me into the whole gamut of how the polyester industry functioned. He was a big fighter. He was the Crimpers Association president.
Okay.
Who were importing partially oriented yarn, reducing it to a yarn of thin size and selling it. They were all small operators, 10 crores, 15 crores, 20 crores turnover. And one collector of customs was used by Reliance to stop their imports overseas. Some 6,000, 8,000 tons of partially oriented yarn was blocked for 180 days and it became stone.
Okay.
Some hundreds of people became insolvent. This man took up the fight. And we found one day he was cut in 20 places and he was thrown on the road.
Dead?
Almost.
Almost.
And an auto rickshaw driver retrieved him and took him to the hospital. This is what personally triggered me into fighting.
Okay. Good. And how does it feel? Because I was just seeing India Today made a list of 50 most powerful men, and I saw Mr. Mukesh Ambani, Anil Ambani, and you, all 3 featured in the same list. so it's a sort of a poetic justice, a natural
That's
justice.
a joke actually.
That's wonderful. The reason, sir, what I really want to know from you is about the economics, the economy. What do you think is the original economic thought of Bharat?
You see, our economic thought was greatly linked to our culture, our value systems, and our social order. Many people thought that India was a great success in spiritual terms, in cultural terms, in civilization terms, in literary terms, arts, music, but it was an economic failure. This is the kind of impression that has been created by our education system, our public discourse, and our intellectual understanding of India. This is what made us feel that we are worthless in a world which is being dominated by economic atmosphere. See, this to the extent that Karl Marx had some good words to say about India. In 1853, he wrote a couple of articles in New York Herald Tribune, which is the International Herald Tribune, in which he said India is some kind of, there is a common rule, there is a common way of understanding, there is a common way of looking after people. But India is living in villages. Village republic, every village is capable of looking after itself. It doesn't need anything from any other village. In a way, there is equality. This is what he said. But unfortunately, for 2000 years, this country has not changed. It is worshipping monkeys and cow. It is semi-barbaric. This society has to be shaken out of its stagnation by a brute force, and that is what the British is doing. It is a painful but pleasurable destruction that the British is doing to the society and economy of India. This is what he wrote. He called us a semi-barbaric society because we worship cow and monkey. Then Max Weber, he wrote in 1915 two books, one on China and another on India, the religion of Hinduism and Buddhism, where he said because of belief in karma and rebirth, these two societies are disqualified for development under modern competitive capitalism, which requires individual enterprise, entrepreneurship. Because his study of the European American economy has been based on the difference between Catholic and Protestant societies. He said Catholic societies are lagging behind, whether it is Italy, whether it is France, Spain, they are all lagging behind. All Protestant societies are moving forward, whether it is America, England, or Canada, or New Zealand, Australia, they are all moving forward because they are focused on individualism and then enterprise and then entrepreneurship. This is not the forte of Catholic societies. And he applied the same logic here because there is not much of individualism seen in the Indian ethos, the Indian literature, Indian way of life, and we believe in caste and rebirth. So these two societies can never come up unless they cease to be what they are. You know, these two people exerted the maximum influence on the Indian intelligentsia, according to researchers, on the Indian public discourse, on the Indian education system, so much so. The thoughts of these two people was incorporated in a mandate that the United Nations gave to the underdeveloped nations in 1951. I have made references to it in my speeches, that unless the old philosophies are scrapped, unless the old relationships are finished, the societies which are aspiring to develop can never develop. So this became the overall understanding of Indian intellectuals, economists, leaders, public discourse about how India should reframe itself, cease to be what it is, to develop. This was what was guiding our people, and the climax came when Professor Rajkrishna, who was asked in 1978 why India is not developing as fast as other socialist countries, even though it is following the same socialist policies. He said we can have only Hindu rate of growth. This Hindu rate of growth was a product of this thinking. This was 1978. This whole process runs from 1853 to 1978. In 1983, something stunning happens. Paul Bayrock, who was one of the most famous economic historians, was mandated by the General Agreement on Trade and Tariff to write the history of the world economy from 1750 to 1900. He came out with the stunning finding that in 1750, China was the leader of the world economy with 34% of the world's GDP, and India with 24.5%. England and America put together just 2%. This stunned the world. If this research had been available, Karl Marx could not have said this.
That's true.
Max Weber could not have said that. And certainly Professor Rajkrishna should not have condemned India like that. So the West wanted to know what happened in 2000 years. Just this 150 years research is not sufficient. Then the OECD countries constituted a development studies institute, and they mandated Angus Madison to do 2000 years study of the world history, economic history. And he came out with this finding in 2001, World Economic History, a Millennial Perspective, in which he said for 1400 years India was leading the world economy. And in 1500, India and China became equal. In 1600, China overtook India. In 1700, India overtook China. The game was between these two countries. It was only in 1850 they began to lose. And by 1900, two countries which had 60% share of world's GDP came down to just 8%. China 6.2%, India 1.8%. This is not known. There is subordinate studies like Indian Merchant Navy, how dominant it was. It was seen in Roman Egyptian records, how Roman Parliament discussed about the domination of Indian traders, how India exchanged its goods for gold and how it was draining Roman gold. All these materials came later. And then Marco Polo was writing about Indian shipping industry. And then studied during Akbar's time how our consumption was much more than the consumption of Europe. And then the British study, even in places like Kadapa and Kurnool, which are supposed to be the most backward district, there was no distinction between the rich and the poor. The gap in their consumption was only 1:3. All these things nobody studied. When I studied and spoke about it in the IIT Bombay, the IIT students said, we know nothing about these things. So you run a course for us. For 4 years, I ran a course for the IIT Bombay management students on Indian economy, finance and business.
Wonderful. See, and you are right. But I was reading somewhere that the division of labor, which later on Karl Marx spoke about, that was done by Manu in Manu Smriti. Very informally, that people, all these Baniyas and Vash and all these people, they were doing the trade, they were also giving interest, because you have interest papers being found. And until Chanakya came and as an economic reformer and he created policies around the economy and how to govern and all that. So we had loosely speaking, we had an understanding of economy and banking and all those kind of things.
No, I tell you, our economy was based on complete participation by the society. Everybody had a sense of duty to perform in a village. It is not the macroeconomics of India was linked to the microeconomics of India. There was no gap between the micro and macroeconomics. In the village, everybody was supervised as to what is his contribution to the society, to the common kitty. And so these village panchayat supervised the working of the society, which included contribution by everybody. And though the consideration was settled only at the year end, when the crop came, it was divided. But till then, the services were purely based on relations. A relation-based economy was functioning in India, which had nothing to do with exchange. If at all exchange took place, it was between the state and the subject. Very rarely between the subjects, because subjects were all in a village. But this society, when it had relationship with the rest of the world, that was all in terms of gold and silver. And that is why India accumulated gold to such an extent. The BIS, this Bank of International Settlement, said that till 1929, in 400 years, India accumulated almost 16 to 18% of the world's gold production. That is the extent of India's trade surplus. And it lost almost half of it between 1929 and 1934 because of the foreign rule. So we had built an economic model based on relationship. For example, joint family. It is a relation-based economic order in which there is sharing, there is social security, there is care of elders, there is the bringing up of children, and then the society. In the village society, nobody would be left hungry. The village will look after. And everybody was included. It was the most inclusive economy. That is why we could sustain a large population. You see, the demographic factors are important for economics is a very later development. This is the development of the 80s and 90s. Before that, population was considered to be a burden. But how we maintained this large population, this was because of huge sharing. This was disturbed during the British period because the state came and grabbed the gap between the different segments of the society. And that is where the Indian economy got disturbed. our share in the world GDP, which was a quarter of the world's GDP,
Yeah, that's true.
came down to 1.8%. This is a proven thing. This is considered to be the most authentic economic history of the world. So now many people do not know. It is not taught in our education. If the IIT did not know about it, you can understand what would happen to a municipal school. That is how Indians are considered to be an economic failure because of the huge propaganda machineries that were set in motion during the colonial period, which continues even today.
Yeah, but then there must be some native intelligence about economy in our people. That's why when the 2008 depression, when all the US and all the banks went bankrupt, that time India had maximum saving. We survived that.
Two instances. One, that another demonetization. That this country could function without 90% cash supply. It was because of relationship. Everybody went into credit mode. Everybody knew everybody else. Everybody knew whom he was dealing with. The farmers were delivering produce in mandis, and the mandi people were selling it to the mill owners. And transactions are being taken because it is a relation-based society, just is a contract-based society. This distinction came in anthropological model between Malinowski's study and Henry Main's study. Henry Main said a modern society is a contract-based society. Malinowski said it is not. Even a contract-based society needs relationship for the contract to function. In fact, it is a much larger subject about which many economists also have not studied in depth. There is a huge relationship between sociology, culture and economics. If India is a stable economy, it is not purely because of economic modeling. It is because it is rooted in society, it is rooted in culture, it is rooted in relationships. So nobody leaves anybody else simply because he is economically weak. He is linked by personal relationship, family relationship. It is also through community relationship. So this is a very, 5,000, 6,000 years of experience and living together and sharing and making sharing integral to one's way of life. This is something unthinkable. That is why we managed in 2008. How? Because we are a bank-driven economy. In the same way as Germany and Japan. In Japan, 51% of the savings is deposited in banks, which pay only 0.8% interest on 5-year deposits. And the share of equities in their savings is just 9%. We are like that because it's a family-based, community-run, relationship-oriented society. Only in the West, where relationships are gone, people go for risky securities. And there is a relationship between state taking care of the social security and the growth in the stock market. The more the society takes care of the people through universal social security scheme, the people go for risky savings. If the state is overburdened, equity market will rise. How many people have studied this intricate relationship between the state-society relationship and the shift from safe savings to risky savings? This is not being done. And India, the rise of India, and starting with the rise of Japan, and generally the rise of Asia, must give rise to a new economic thinking, modeling and approach. Now the entire approach is based on the American and Anglo-Saxon model, on which even the continental Europe has a problem. Continental Europe is not equity driven. Anglo-Saxon Europe is equally driven. The entire economic model is a product of Anglo-Saxon Europe. So that is why there appears to be a conflict between the Indian way.
So what is that new thinking you're talking about? New economic thinking.
The new economic thinking is, for example, I went around from Ludhiana to Batala to my studies started with Ludhiana in 1993. I've been a corporate advisor. Many big corporates have been either my clients or my friends. In fact, when the tsunami of globalization came, they didn't know how to handle this damn thing. It's a new animal. And I had hours and hours I sat with all these industries. They said, our ground is shifting, we don't know where we are. Many government officials began advising the industrialists that you can't produce anymore. We have been a trader for so long, 300 years. You give your manufacturing because you are scaling up, it's not possible. You don't have global level capital, you don't have global level capacity. and you have to know, look up the global level market, your market is nothing. This is how they began talking. So then I started traveling across the country from Ludhiana to Patala to Rajkot to Jamnagar to Morbi, right down to Thoothukudi. 7 years I only traveled across the country. Then I found you can never understand this country through universities or books or colleges or lectures or research reports. You have to actually see how Ludhiana emerged as one of the most important engineering centers, particularly machine tool and cycle industry. It is because of a community called Ramgadia. They are artisans. We completely ignored them.
True.
I went to Rajkot. It was a desert. And none of the people who put up this huge entrepreneurial development model knew English. And in Rajkot, I was talking to the Rajkot Industrial Estates Association president. He didn't know one word of English and I didn't know one word of Gujarati. We had a translator in between. And I asked him, how did this development take place? He said, when Patel imported a diesel engine and he found by reverse engineering he could make it. And now we have 55 assembling units, 2,700 ancillary units, and we export this engineering finished good, finished
I've heard
everything. And I came to Morbi. I asked this question to many people, which is the place which is the highest per capita income in India even today.
Morbi.
Morbi.
And how did they make it happen?
The population is how much you know that? 2.4 lakhs. And 1.4 lakhs is employed.
Okay.
And very large Muslim population is there. They all work together. And there is 1,000 diamond cutting units, 1,200 ceramic units, and 1,200 textile units. And another finding is there is a caste-based entrepreneurship in India, about which in Tirupur, the World Bank studied it and brought out in its report how the community rotates its savings through trust amongst itself.
That's true.
And how it shares information. Somebody goes and buys the best machine. He doesn't keep it to himself. He tells his brother, he tells his in-laws. So that information and money can be shared only by market. This is the modern economic theory, has been disproved by relationship. So Tirupur has developed in the last 25 years, 30 years as the largest knitwear export unit in the world. How? This was studied by Boston Consulting, and then it was incorporated in the World Bank report in 2002 that it is a community which does it. When a community gets into business, it becomes prosperous, it gets into a higher level of behavior, but when it gets into politics, it doesn't do the same. I said community plus commerce is growth, is prosperity, is education, advancement. Community plus politics is destruction of relationship.
That's true.
Because a community in business wants good relationship with other community. A community in politics wants to divide. You know, this is done in Tamil Nadu. In Tamil Nadu, we did a study of 6 communities. One, the Kongu Gowder community, the Nada community, the Naidu community, and one Raju community. These are 4 business communities. Very powerful communities politically.
Okay, now I want to ask you 3 very fundamental things. Number 1, what do you think have been the milestones of Indian economy and especially banking sector since independence?
See,
Milestones.
I would think the nationalisation of banks is a very important fact. Because the national savings were not being properly distributed. Whatever rules we framed, we had social control of banks. It was done for a very wrong reason. To score a political point against our opponents, Mrs. Gandhi did it. But that proved to be a very important milestone in the history of
Indian banking.
Without that, at 70% of the Indian savings is under the control of the government. No other government has this kind of power or responsibility in the world. In 2008, when the banks collapsed, the governments had to come to the rescue of the bank and own it because money is government responsibility. This has been proved in modern capitalism. Ultimately, money is government responsibility. That is a very important factor. The nationalized banks, which are considered to be a liability by the economists and the column writers and intellectuals and fund managers, is really the only stable asset of India. I think that has sustained the savings habits of people. In 1993, Dr. Jagdish Bhagwati told Manmohan Singh that you should reduce the family savings from 19% of the GDP to 10%, turn it into expenditure, and that will become purchase and production and all that. And we began framing policies for that. But the Indian family system resisted this. 19% family savings became 29% in 20 years. And national savings became from 22% reached 37%. That is why we sustained a 10% growth rate.
True.
That means we are a savings driven economy and family is the foundation of the savings. This is the second biggest important development that happened at the time of globalization, when the globalization policies worked against it. The Indian culture was able to stand up. And in 2007, the Economic Survey made an assessment of what happened from 1981 to 1991, 10-year command economy period, and from 1991 to 2007, which is the market economy period. They found that the behavior of the people did not change in this period. The household economics. They said whenever the per capita income rose up, the savings rose up more than the per capita income. Whenever the per capita income slowed down, the per capita personal expenditure slowed down even more, so that the savings is not affected. This is the remark finding made in 2007. So, a stable economy comes from a stable banking system, which is supported by a stable social order founded in a family. And Indian economy is therefore feminine in character. It is moderate, it is savings oriented, against savings. Even though the biggest problem we have with women in the house is what to throw and what not to throw. You want to throw something which they said which is useful to us. It is conserving economy. This is the second biggest factor. The third factor which I will look at is the Pokhran atom bomb blast. That really put up the Indian. If there is any one event which I will source to say which put the confidence of India up, it was that. That lady, she wrote an article in Economic
Tarasina. She was my boss. She was my first boss.
She wrote an article in Economic Times in 2002, where she said she used to travel across the world and stay in friends' houses and relatives' houses. And the way they abused India, she never used to get sleep. But she said all this changed around one day.
After Pokhran.
And the entire Indian, that Indianness came in the open. And that resulted in the India development bonds becoming a success.
That's true.
That is what the West looked at. When the India development bonds became a success, the West began withdrawing the sanctions. Then they found India is not just one mass people. It's a nation. Then only the West began looking at normalizing the nuclear relationship with India. That one India development bond success. This is the third milestone. The fourth milestone, according to me, is the way we have now taken over virtually the head table position in the world leadership because of the current government, the way it has done, the way it has handled Pakistan, the way it has handled China, Doklam, the way the security policies are being framed. I think we have now reached the level of a potential global geopolitical power. This is going to be an important factor for our development. No development takes place unless you are a rule setter. India is a rule setter today.
We are setting agenda everywhere.
We can say this is what we want. We could never do it even till 2014. We are accepting rules. We have become a rule setter. This is a very important development. I think this has to be sustained.
Okay, and last two questions. What on demonetization and GST?
You see, demonetization is something which, if it had not happened, the economy would have collapsed. This I have spoken, I will tell you. Real development is when the goods and services are produced, exchanged, and they go up. Fake development is when the asset prices rise. Between 1999 and 2004, the real development took place. Growth rate was 5.4%, inflation was 4.8%, and then your employment generated was 16 million jobs in 5 years. The next 6 years, the growth rate was almost 9 plus, and inflation was high, of course, and the jobs generated was just 27 lakhs. And this produced the biggest burden on the economy because the money which came from outside, which we could not digest, Y.V. Reddy wanted that money stopped by Tobin's tax. Chidambaram did not accept it. We allowed all the money to come in. They all became bank deposits. They all had to be lent. So you cut down the import duty to zero to force lend this money. And when 2011 the depression came, the money that was lent in anticipation of a 10% growth rate by allowing capital goods to be imported into India at zero rate of duty became a burden on the banking system. That is the NPA. So, demonetization was an attempt to check the asset price rise. Whereas the asset price rise had returned, the land prices had risen by 21% in Vajpayee time. In the next 6 years, it rose by 400 to 2100%.
Oh my God.
Depending upon the area. The gold prices, which rose by 38% in Vajpayee's period, rose by 338%. Stock market, which rose by about 31% in that period, rose by 350%. This was funded by the high denomination notes.
Okay.
Unless you arrest this fake growth which produced fake statistics, and it was shifting consumption from poor people to the rich, and gap between the rich and the poor was going up. If it had not been done, if the currency, high currency production had gone on in that, today the total amount of currency in circulation would have been in the range of about 26 to 28 lakh crores with 90% of its high denomination. Property values would have zoomed. The economy would not have survived.
That's true.
This intervention was needed. And of course, without demonetization, GST would not have been a success because a huge formalization of the economy took place because of demonetization. Otherwise, GST could never have taken roots in this country.
So GST is a logical progression of demonetization,
yes,
or that is a prequel to GST?
See, the only thing the government where it went wrong was, the original suggestion was that you should have demonetization coupled with an income disclosure scheme. The government announced the income disclosure scheme first and the demonetization later. That became a gas chamber.
Okay. Yeah.
So people finding all methods of depositing the cash and all that. If only the government had announced both of them together, the government would have collected 2 to 2.5 lakh crores of tax. This is where the government went wrong.
GST.
Just like, say, single rate of tax is not possible, multi-rate percentage. They should have also worked on graded participation in GST. In fact, if I were the person taking decision, I would have said till 3 crores, I will give you 3 years time to join the mainstream. Till then you pay only 1.5% or 2%, irrespective of the rate. You would have given the fellow 3 years time to participate. From day one you have to participate is what put huge burden on the small man.
So micro industries, primarily those people are the ones
with which I am working. So that is why I did not defend the GST the way I defended demonetization. That also hit the poor people. But I have suggested the money lending for small people through the Mudra scheme. But the Mudra scheme was stopped by the Reserve Bank because they didn't allow the recruitment of some 100,000 franchisees. The banks could not have done the job. I said, you have franchisees to lend the money. It is the local money lender who can do it. If they had done that, then because of demonetization, whatever problem came to the small man would not have come.
But these problems are going to be ironed out in long term or
Yeah, they are doing it already, but it could have been done
better? Okay. And so Reserve Bank, is everything sorted with Reserve Bank and
You
government
see,
now?
Reserve Bank, this gap was quite unnecessary. This gap, in my view, has been created by a theoretical understanding of what is the independence of the Reserve Bank. Resisting the national government equals Reserve Bank independence is the global theory today. That's why even the US Federal Reserve System is resisting
Trump, yeah.
See, unless you resist national governments, you are not independent. I think this thinking is wrong. You have to work with the national government.
Same I feel about the media also. Just attacking the establishment for the sake of attacking the
No,
establishment.
that is, you see, and the anti-establishment trend in the media set in because of the emergency. In the emergency, you were bloody crawling.
But today media themselves, they are the establishment.
Today, media is no media.
Yeah, it's the establishment.
75% is corrupt. I can say that I am part of the media. Today, to find an honest journalist or editor is not an easy job.
That's true.
And you have all these 21 years, 22 years who are questioning ministers, prime ministers, Reserve Bank. I mean, understand what is their understanding?
I was reading in some new digital website, somebody wrote about you some nasty thing, and when I went to check that, it was a 24, 25-year-old young girl who mostly writes about society and lifestyle, and she also had a comment to make on you. I can bet my life she won't even know what is your past, what you did in emergency, and you wrote against some money. She has no idea, and she thought just because you supported demonetization, you are part of the money chronism and all those kind of things. Imagine this is the level of journalism in India.
Today there is no education. See, for everything there is qualification, education except journalism.
That's true.
Only appearance.
I am a student of journalism.
No, another thing I tell you. Today appearance is more important. Today news has become theatre.
True.
How you deliver, how you talk. Atalji, he used to have this resistance. Whenever a question is put, Atalji used to think for 1 minute and then only answer. अरे भैया ये टीवी आ गया कैसा सोचेंगे तुरंत बोलना पड़ता है हमको तो वो आता नहीं. He used to say in jest.
Yeah.
So TV journalism is instant journalism. If you don't give your answer instantly, you are not an intelligent man.
Yeah.
You are not seen as a thinker.
Yeah.
You are seen as unintelligent. But can you, any minister, can speak so instantly
Must
on an unprepared subject, and he is in a responsible position? So what the media is now ill-suited to deal with responsible people.
Brilliantly said that. Now, in the last thing before I close this, has been a long discussion about Bharat. Why do you have hope and confidence in the success of Bharat? I believe that the story of Bharat is a story of a hero like Amitabh Bachchan in Bollywood movies or Rajnikant, totally hopeless. I was talking to Swaminathan ji in Chennai, and they said that India will die like sheep in a slaughterhouse because we had no food grains. Everybody said that democracy is not suited for India. Hindu rate of growth. All these things we were told. Despite that, today we are such a strong force to reckon with. Is the rise of a hero. Theoretically they teach. What is your hope and confidence? What is it one thing about Bharat which you think will take Indian banking and economy to a great height?
Our scale of timing. Now America is thinking whether they should at all publish quarterly results, because the whole mind gets glued to quarterly things. Our idea is different. We look at life, not only this life, we look at the next life also. There is one study by a Brookings Institute economist by name Bobsworth. He said the savings in Asia is a dynastic savings. It's not personal savings. This dynastic approach, that gives so much stability to your society. Dynastic not in the political sense, in the cultural sense, in the economic sense. That you don't produce for yourself, you produce for the next generation. You don't yearn for yourself, you yearn for the next generation. This I want in sometime in 1992 or 93. I read maybe even earlier, I read an article about the Christian sense of time in the Bible, and the concept of end times in the Time magazine, where they said, the entire Western history was driven by the fact the world is going to end.
True.
So that others imagine how the world will end. See, when the world will end concept was, there was no aeroplane, there was no train, there was no bus, there was no car. He said there are thousands of aeroplanes going. There are millions of buses and cars going. There are thousands and thousands of ships going. When the world ends, then all these planes will be pilotless. So this is one aspect. He said, the world is going to end as driven the West to instant killing, war. And I want you to read a website built by Professor R.J. Raman. 30-year research. He noted all the violent incidents in the world by human beings against human beings. And he said 1.2 billion people have been killed by human beings, by human action. The only country where such killings did not take place was India.
That's true.
This is there, it's true. So our capacity to stand up to hardship without killing each other is what is going to be the winner.
Wonderful.
Our concept of time, the yugas. You are a little speck in the whole thing. It's a very major psychological factor working in India's favor. Holmes actually speaks about it. An Indian is prepared to wait with resignation, even with satisfaction. I sometimes find the Indians also celebrate the delay. I was in a railway station. When a train was announced it was delayed, the father said, go and get half a dozen vadas here, the train is delayed. He is willing to celebrate.
True.
Something, when you cannot create this mentality easily. That's why India is not susceptible to revolutions. You may have quick skirmishes here and there. No revolution. Karl Marx wanted a revolution. It does not happen.
All revolutions failed in this world.
Because we believe only in evolution. Change with continuity.
Yeah.
That is the Indian model. We have to deliver it to the world.
So you believe slowly and steadily.
100%. 100%. I am confident.
And 2019, what do you
I
think?
don't believe 2019 will be the repeat of 1971.
Really?
I was on the other side in 2019. I was working in Kamaraj, Murati Desai. They all wanted Indira Gandhi finished.
Okay.
If you fight one man, you are going to lose.
Wonderful, I hope so. And this was wonderful. I think I'll have to come back. So here I came to learn primarily, and this learning, I think I've become a fan of yours, and I've become a student of yours now. And you are a fighter, I'm a fighter, and people who do not know, both of us are fighting the same case where of contempt of court. I hope we'll win that too.
Don't worry about it.
Okay. Thank you, Ji. Namaskar. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you.